And that's what's happening now with Indian farm workers who are picking genetically engineered cotton, engineered to produce this Bt toxin. Just by touching the cotton, by loading it onto trucks, by leaning against it, they're developing allergic reactions, some having to go to the hospital. And the allergic symptoms are exactly the same as those of the 500 Americans and Canadians who complained of allergic reactions when they were sprayed with the Bt in its natural form. Then in India, they allow sheep to graze on the cotton plants after harvest, and within a week of grazing, 1 out of every 4 sheep are dead, and estimated 10,000 sheep died in the region. Now you also have the fact that genetic engineering causes unpredicted side effects in the growing, and so they convinced thousands and thousands of cotton farmers to plant Monsanto's genetically engineered cotton. The cotton failed in many parts, and tens of thousands have committed suicide as a result of being indebted and not being able to pay back their loan. In fact, the Bt corn, the corn engineered to produce this toxin, has been associated by farmers with thousands of sterile pigs, hundreds of sterile cows.
Well, most of the farmers I talk to say their animals won't even eat it unless you mix it in with some sugar. Stay there. Yeah, the bugs and animals won't eat it, but we are. Folks, just like you said earlier, the rats won't eat these tomatoes. You have to force feed them.
I read the news today, oh boy, about a lucky man who made the grade. And though the news was wrong,
I'm going to ask our prestigious guest about how they're testing and using hundreds of different genetically engineered bacteria and viruses in the oceans for spills, chemical spills and things. Also, callers are calling and wanting to know about the Doomsday Vault, so we'll get his take on that. The elite definitely know what's happening. Okay, going back to our guest, best-selling author Jeffrey M. Smith, Seeds of Deception, now Genetic Roulette. Please continue, sir.
Well, you made a very good point about some of the people you talk to describe how animals will not eat genetically engineered feed when given the choice. We've seen that with geese, cows, pigs, elk, deer, raccoons, squirrels, mice, and rats. So it's my job to get people up to the level of animals. And I teach people how to avoid it. It's on my website at seedsofdeception.com. One of the most shocking results that really motivate people to avoid eating genetically engineered foods came in the only human feeding experiment ever conducted on GMOs. Now, this was to determine whether or not genes survive digestion, because this was a big concern among the FDA. In fact, the British Medical Association, which called for a moratorium on GMOs, linked this as one of the reasons. They were concerned that genes from genetically engineered plants might transfer into the DNA of human gut bacteria. Now, what they were concerned about was the antibiotic-resistant marker gene that's used in GM crops that could end up creating bacterial diseases that are accidentally engineered to withstand medicines, to withstand antibiotics. And so the biotech industry told the FDA, oh, don't worry, genes are destroyed during digestion. Transfer into the DNA of human gut bacteria is not possible. So they took after years and years, late in 2002, they finally did a test. They took 7 human volunteers, and these volunteers had colostomy bags. They had their lower intestines removed, not for the study, and they fed them genetically engineered soy burgers and soy milkshakes, and they found, to their surprise, how much intact genetically engineered soy had survived digestion through the stomach and small intestine and ended up in the colostomy bag.
Well, look at the Crohn's type diseases are exploding. Everybody I know seems to have intestinal problems, and then the universities in Germany found what's killing the honeybees predominantly is that this bacteria that is been genetically engineered in these crops is getting into the honeybees and frying their little gut.
Well, you're getting ahead of me, because that's exactly what they found. The next thing that they checked, they looked inside the bacteria before they fed these people the burger and milkshake, and they found that in 3 of the 7 human volunteers, the gene that had been inserted into the soybean to make the soybean resist death by herbicide, that herbicide-tolerant gene had transferred from some soy food they had eaten in the past and had taken up residence in the DNA of their gut bacteria and continued to function, which means long after they stopped eating genetically engineered soybeans, they're still producing this foreign genetically engineered protein inside their own intestines.
Now, a corollary to this, and I keep interrupting. I want listeners to know you're only giving them the base stuff. As scary as it sounds, it gets much worse. In over 90%, these are federal studies, but they haven't gotten a lot of attention, of people with Crohn's disease and also in autistic children, they are finding the measles virus from the vaccine in their gut. So again, you take something that's been genetically modified in a vaccine, and it's frying the guts. I mean, this is incredible.
Yes, and the thing is, the gut bacteria is very important. In fact, there are 10 times more cells in our gut bacteria than there are in our entire bodies. The gut bacteria is used for creating vitamins and minerals, it's used as part of the immune system, and it's used as part of digestion. Now consider what would happen if you eat a genetically engineered corn chip. Now, corn is genetically engineered predominantly to produce a pesticide. If the gene that produces this pesticide were to transfer to the DNA of your gut bacteria, it might theoretically transform your intestinal flora into living pesticide factories, possibly for the long term. So this is a completely possible scenario.
But you say possible, they're covering it up. This stuff's happening everywhere.
Now, when I talk about this at medical conferences, and I've been to several, the doctors come up to me afterwards, and what they say consistently is, we've seen a lot of gastrointestinal problems in the last 10 years. Maybe it's this colonization of the gut bacteria from genes that have been inserted into crops. Now, the biotech industry, when I've debated them, they'll come back with a really wimpy argument saying, oh, well, if genes transferred from plants, we'd be green, we'd have the photosynthesis. If genes transferred from plants, it would happen all the time. But they completely neglect the fact that there are natural barriers from genes transferring from plant genes into bacteria DNA. But with genetically engineered crops, they put in genes from the bacteria into the plant.
Which is animal, which is able to transfer over and is.
Exactly. It is optimized. In all of the natural barriers that we know about that prevent transfer from plant genes into bacteria are overcome and stripped away with genetic engineering.
Since you bring up their spin, this is the Rush Limbaugh talking point. They say George Washington Carver crossed plants and got different varieties. Well, that was using natural breeding, like breeding dogs or horses. You weren't changing any of the original DNA. You were taking the animal with different characteristics and going for that, and you still get some problems. That's totally different. They talk to us like we're little kids. No, if you take a bacteria and stick a cockroach gene and a plant gene in it, and maybe 15 other genes, and then stick it in a corn plant, that's totally separate.
That's very well said, and that is exactly their spin. They try and say, oh, we've been doing this for 10,000 years, it's just a more precise method. And it's needed to feed a hungry world, and it's safe, and the FDA proves it's safe, and it'll reduce pesticides, and it'll increase yields. All of that is PR spin. Now, about this time, I am suspecting that some of your listeners are concerned about how to avoid eating genetically engineered food. So I think we have to touch on that before we get into more of these risks. There are 4 ways. First, you can buy products that say organic. Second, and organic products are not allowed to use GM inputs. Second, you can buy products which have voluntary labels on it that say non-GMO or made without genetically modified ingredients. Third, you can consult a shopping guide, which you can find on our website at seedsofdeception.com under How to Avoid GM Foods. And fourth, you can learn what the at-risk ingredients are and read the panels on the side of the packages to make sure it doesn't contain one of the 7 genetically engineered crops in North America. And that is soy, corn, cotton, and canola. Those are the 4 major ones. And unfortunately, soy and corn are in, I would say, 9 out of 10 processed foods in all sorts of derivatives. You can get a list of those derivatives on our site.
Because they're the big cheap filler.
Yeah, exactly.